Thank you, Evan. As we get going with Fox, Jack Heath on this Monday, J Dog, as we get closer to the end of this calendar year. It is a Monday morning. We're going to come back to thoughts on Jimmy Carter and New Hampshire, going back to 1976, and why the New Hampshire First in the Nation presidential primary does matter, did matter, and will matter, and helped really send Carter on the way to becoming president. We'll have thoughts right here from the Granite State. But J Dog, good morning. 6 Hour Studios, Jack Heath, J Dog on the boards. Good morning, New Hampshire. Good morning into Maine, Southern Maine, WTSN AM and FM, where it is quite rainy out there and foggy in parts and mild, 54 for a high. Good morning, Lakes region. Good morning, New England. Good morning, worldwide. Hey, Alexa. Hey, Google, play the pulse of an H. Again, we are looking at kind of a yucky day if you're a skier or a snowboarder in the North Country, where a lot of people are still hunkering down over the holiday period here, but 54 for a high today. Now tomorrow, New Year's Eve day is looking nicer actually. Some sunshine and near 50 for a high tomorrow is going to be real nice. And then New Year's Day, we're back to the rain, 44 for a high. J-Dog on the boards. Before we get to some of the political stuff, Paul Steinhauser, I believe. Well, let's get to Paul because he's technically taken a few days off. Paul Steinhauser reports nationally for Fox News Digital. And of course, delighted he's part of our Good Morning New Hampshire, the Pulse of an H on this Monday. Good morning, Paul. Yeah. Yeah. Never too early for a U.S. Senate race because they're a year-long battle. I think he's running. I think he is serious, and it should be interesting. The question is, will Gene Shaheen decide to run again? And that's I think will be a personal decision. Paul, real quickly on Jimmy Carter, there's a lot of talk, and I think his life, not being not his presidency domestically, but his life as a human being, really is his legacy. What he did over time with his former First Lady Rosalynn in terms of Habitat for Humanity, the Carter effort around the world. He was an amazing individual helping people. But the thing is that I think New Hampshire's presidential, First in the Nation presidential primary really helped make him, because he came here pretty much unknown from Plains, Georgia. I remember he'd go to the typical campaign stops back then, the historic New Hampshire primary stops, but he'd stay with families, kind of like Bill Clinton did that with people like John Broderick and Steve McCall, because he didn't have a big campaign. He was from Georgia. No one really knew him here. Went on to win the primary, went on to become president. And in today's Democrat national, picture, I'm wondering if DNC and including Joe Biden, who was, singing praise to the late president, will acknowledge that it was New Hampshire's first in the nation presidential primary that showed you can come from the South, you can be a nobody, and you can sit there in people's living rooms and shake hands and get to know people. Like you just mentioned, Scott Brown going around the state. And New Hampshire is very politically active, and the primary works. And I'm hoping current powers to be in the Democrat primary that basically eliminated our last primary here with Joe Biden. We'll remember that New Hampshire's primary matters, and what a fitting occasion. Remember that is Jimmy Carter. Right. Paul, have a good few days. Thank you. Happy New Year. Paul Steinhauser with Fox. Just to elaborate for a moment or two on, excuse me, on Jimmy Carter and the current hypocrisy with the Democrats nationally. So, really, the top news story today, and there'll be January 9th will be the official ceremony for former President Carter's funeral in D.C. I'm sure his casket will lay in state in Congress as well. 100 years old, absolutely amazing, a wonderful human being. I think anyone in this current political environment would acknowledge that he was a person of virtue, a person of caring about others, a very genuine, down to earth type person. He was also known for being kind of that first presidential candidate that would wear the jean jacket, sort of that dungaree jean jacket, whatever you want to call it, in dungarees, if you will, jeans and campaign and sneakers. His persona of being the peanut farmer from Plains, Georgia, was a little bit overstated because he and his family were large landowners. They were very successful in business, but he decided after sort of the farming success, the business success in Georgia, to get involved in politics, become governor, and then go on to run for president. He also served in the Navy, a very smart individual, but not really as effective as president during his time. People may not recall, but Ronald Reagan won handily because inflation was through the roof. We had the hostage crisis in Tehran, in Iran, and the failed rescue attempt, and the frustration. Those I think it was more than 50 American hostages. It was my early years of college. I remember watching the news in the corner of my fraternity room, the hostage crisis, where they were held for over a year. But he did broker, with Egypt, and in terms of some peace in the Middle East. But he really, inflation did him in, the domestic agenda. But it was his life after being president where he really showed over the years his genuine desire to help his fellow man and woman, and the fellow citizen. He did so much under the Habitat for Humanity as well as their own effort. Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, he was really an amazing individual as a human being. So that being said, but he also showed that New Hampshire's first in the nation presidential primary was a place that anyone could come to, and Bill Clinton realized that when he declared himself the comeback kid here, uh, coming in second place, but beating a lot of national Democrats, falling short to the late Paul Tsongas, senator from nearby Massachusetts, who passed away. But Clinton went on to become not one, but two-term president, and he really credited New Hampshire quite a bit for his campaign success. But you look at going back, Gary Hart, John McCain is another example of someone who came here not once but twice and took on the national folks with an independent streak. So New Hampshire's primary works, but I would remind Democrats who are singing former President Carter's praise at 100 years old, what an amazing human being, to also remember to fight a little harder for your first in the nation presidential primary. A lot of our leading Democrats just kind of laid down when the DNC and Joe Biden, talk about hypocritical, eliminated our primary this last time around. And people should not forget that. And they gave up our primary too easily and did not speak up as much as they should have. And I think Carter is a very powerful reminder of how important New Hampshire is when it comes to getting the presidents on their way, even if they don't win, but certainly showing who has the capability to become an effective leader. And they campaign door to door, retail, and the people that are just, in my opinion, I don't want to be disrespectful on a Monday out of the gate, but that seem to be ingesting some probably mushrooms that make you hallucinate. But people that, in my opinion, are very politically upside down or twisted are the ones that say, "Oh, we should take away our electoral college and little states shouldn't have a say." And they don't realize that without New Hampshire and all the BS arguments they said because Carter was from the South, that we're not representative, that we're this or that, we're not a good state. New Hampshire on November 5th had one of the highest per capita voter participation rates of any state in the United States of America. We had about a 75% voter participation rate. Other states would give anything for that. Some states were half that. So we participate. The people are engaged in public policy in New Hampshire. They know where the state house is. They know where Washington is. They're very savvy here on politics. It's like it's not combat, a contact sport, as Brad Card will say, who's coming up. But the point is, New Hampshire does and is a very perfect place for the first of the nation presidential primary. And the Democrats who took it away want to just anoint their leaders. They just want to anoint Joe Biden, anoint Kamala Harris, not have people even vote. And if we took away New Hampshire's primary or took away the Electoral College, New York City and California would be electing the presidents the rest of our lives. And if we think you want that, think again. Commentary 603 228 2080. New Congress getting underway in Washington sooner than you think. Brad Card live in the nation's capital coming up. Michael Graham, New Hampshire Journal, also remembering Jimmy Carter and New Hampshire's primary. Hey, Google, hey, Alexa, play the Pulse of an H. Jack Heath, J-Dog on the boards. Back in a moment. A lot of good football, both college bowl and playoffs, as well as NFL. We'll come back to that with J Dog. Some not so great games, including the Patriots being blown out at home by the Chargers. The Jets, what an embarrassing game for Aaron Rodgers. And even the Cowboys, J Dog. Oh my goodness, trounced. And the Bucks had a big one. All right, Brad Card live in Washington as we roll into New Year's or live wherever he is. You never know; he's a moving target. Congress taking shape in terms of a new Congress. I guess the question is, will Johnson remain as Speaker? Changing of the guard, and of course, the passing of Jimmy Carter. Good morning, Brad. Well, where do you want to? It is hockey. By the way, yeah, tomorrow afternoon, Winter Classic in Chicago. All right, where do you want to start? Yep. Yeah, wonderful human being. Yeah, I mean, just an amazing life. I mean, you think of Brad, 100 years, unbelievable. Yep. But I think you'd agree with me. It was his life as a whole that defined him. Yes, being president, but I also talked about how New Hampshire in that first in the nation presidential primary really helped him become president. All right. So what's going on in Washington? We know there will be ceremonies and services for Jimmy Carter. I think January 9th will be the formal one. I think his casket will lay in state. But what about or in Congress? What about new Congress taking shape? Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. What? Right. Can I just want to share one anecdote, Brad. A few weeks back, someone who was a friend of mine, he's still, I think he's retired, but he's still involved in the financial service company he had been involved in. He takes an annual trip to London, England. And this was about Thanksgiving time. And I talked to him right afterwards, and he said, in England, they think President Trump is already in the White House. They don't even know about the procedural stuff over the next few weeks, the end of the year, certifying the election results. The Electoral College is already, each state has done that. But of course, the inauguration. Can you walk us through just a calendar a little bit as we get after New Year's on Wednesday of what's going to happen over the next week or two. And now, of course, the passing of Jimmy Carter, you'll have some degree of that in sort of the middle of this, but the inauguration, the key cabinet members, when the Senate will move on, nominations like Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State. Can you walk us through a little bit of what to expect the next few weeks calendar wise? Right. Mhm. Right. What Mhm. And this will be all about the time of the inauguration or, all about the first month? When when does the inside baseball, but you've been a chief of staff, your brother was one of the longest serving chief of staff for a president, Andrew Card for George W. Bush. When does the Biden team, of course, we don't even know who's really my don't get me going, really runs White. When does the Biden team leave the White House, the executive office building? When does the team go out, and when does the Trump team, when does President Trump, starts, is it right after the inauguration? So, mhm. And when do you think we're gonna see the real yeah. When will the real battles be in the Senate for some of these key confirmations of the choices and the picks that he's made for his cabinet? When will that happen? When will when will the confirmation, like, defense secretary, secretary of state, when will these confirmations be made about? And do we know where the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, is? Is Joni Ernst, is she acquiesced? Do we know where that is? Okay. Mhm. Yeah. Right. Alright, we gotta run. Well, a lot coming up. Alright, well, a lot coming up. We'll catch you in the end of the week. Have a great New Year's. Brad Card, live in DC. Brad Card, Card& and Associates. Thank you. We come back, Michael Graham, New Hampshire Journal, talking about Ann Custer's outgoing remarks about longevity, a message maybe to her own party, these people that make careers out of Congress. Hey, Google, hey, Alexa, play the Pulse of an H. Jack Heath, J-Dog on the board. 6 Hour Studios. Back in a moment. All right, we are back. We are back on a Monday as we get going. Kind of yucky out there, just going to be honest. Mild, though. Mild, rainy, foggy. Tomorrow's nice, New Year's Eve day, and then more rain on Wednesday. But you know what? We haven't had a whole heck of a lot of rain. The problem is, anytime you're at the end of December, beginning of January, even though we've seen these repeated thaw periods, not great news for the ski areas and the riders and the borders up there that want cold and snow. But we will get through it. And we are live 6 hours studios. Michael Graham, New Hampshire Journal, joining us, talking about a New Hampshire perspective on Jimmy Carter and the first in the nation presidential primary. And then some of the other news of the day, including Ann Custer and her interview she did with Fox about people shouldn't make a career out of staying in Congress for like 10 or 20 years. Good morning, Michael. No, but his life was what he, I think, will be remembered by more than his presidency. Mm, yeah. Yep. But isn't there a good amount of hypocrisy with some of the senior Democrats here who laid down when the DNC and Joe Biden eliminated our primary without fighting louder and harder? Mm, mhm. Mhm. Yeah, 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 yeah. Fit. All right, Michael, Ann Custer talking about, people should have make a career out of serving in Congress. All right, Michael, good stuff on a Monday. Happy New Year. If we don't catch you tomorrow, we'll catch you at the end of the week. Michael Graham, New Hampshire Journal. Speaking of Senator Shaheen, she was on my show Friday. J Dog helped me out. It was a week. It was not this past Friday, the one before. She called in, and that was when there was a looming government shutdown that was pushed down the road a few weeks, if you will, or whatever. But it's interesting. She's arguably, speaking of Jimmy Carter, people don't know this, but Jean Shaheen has had an incredible career in politics here in New Hampshire. I arguably, not to sound like the Neil Levesque of the world or the academics here for a moment, but arguably, I think the only other person, J Dog, that comes to mind on hitting all the bases so repeatedly, actually more than Chris Sununu or John Lynch, is Judd Gregg, the former Republican U.S. Senator, member of Congress, executive counselor, governor. Jean Shaheen, people may not remember this, was a state senator. But before that, or during it, she was an incredible Democrat presidential primary strategist. And she and someone who moved from New Hampshire, I believe last I knew, she was in Colorado, but Sue Casey really kind of took Gary Hart, the Colorado senator who ran for president in New Hampshire's primary, and kind of shaped his very successful primary. Jimmy Carter won here, but Jean Shaheen has had a storied career in politics in New Hampshire, going from state senate to governor to U.S. senator. But Judd Gregg, I think, touched just about every base. And they sort of stand alone in those categories if you're a political historian looking at, wins in offices, plural. Will Jean Shaheen run this next year? And the reason why I say next year, because it's a 2026, but it's a 2025 race. It starts right after the new year, right after this week. Scott Brown was on my show just a week or so ago, the same day Jean Shaheen was, all but saying he's more than seriously looking at running for the U.S. Senate as a Republican here. He ran once before against Shaheen. It was a very spirited race, actually. And he's been the former U.S. Senator from Massachusetts and, of course, ambassador, but he's now lived in Rye, New Hampshire, the better part of the last 12 years, and he's serious, and he's a pretty serious candidate. When Scott Brown jumps into anything, and I mean this, whether it's the ocean, when he's doing his competitive swimming, or everything he does, he's doing it with tenacity. And I think he's serious. I think he will run. I think he's putting his name out there right now to kind of freeze the field about for other Republicans who are maybe thinking about a run, maybe potentially. I'm not saying he will. John E. Sununu, former Congress and senator, but I think Scott Brown is pretty formidable. I think his wife Gail Huff Brown, is very formidable as well. She ran for Congress, but she's a media savant, wonderful person. I worked with her in the past, and in the when she was in WCVB and Channel 5 and New Hampshire media and here in this building. I think they're a formidable team. I think Jean Shaheen, my humble opinion, will be near 80 years old, and she's got a big, wonderful family of kids and grandkids, and I mean it. And the thing I'd be looking at, she has a ranking position now in the U.S. Senate, one of the high-ranking members on, I think it's foreign relations and foreign policy, and she will be in the minority in the next, after the next few weeks when the new Congress takes shape. But she's a ranking senior member, respected by both sides of the aisle. Sometimes you like to go out on top. The problem with these U.S. Senate races, no matter who runs, they are nasty. They are full of out of state money. All the politicians say, well, we need to take the dark money out of politics. And then you have a U.S. Senate race. Now, we did not have one on November 5th in New Hampshire this last cycle. We had an open governor's race and two congressional races and the presidential race and all the local races, but we did not have a big U.S. Senate race. So this one will start really in the next few weeks in the new year. All of 2025, pretty much this spring and summer, you'll see, the thing take shape. But these are big races and they are very nasty. No matter what you say, it's hard to run a good, what they say, a good clean race because all these out of state interest and everyone comes in and it's just a blur and they're nasty. They are nasty. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. But life's about choices. I just don't know if Jean Shaheen at this stage in her life wants to go through, even if she were to be successful and win. And some would say she at least has a 50-50 chance, even after the Trump big win on November 5th and the Republican pickups here in the state house. And Scott Brown would be a formidable challenger or candidate as a Republican candidate and to run for the Senate. I think it would be a battle. And you just got to, before you go through that, you got to ask yourself, do you really want that at that stage in your life? Some commentary. Not sure is my answer. Not sure. 603-228-2080. We come back. Doug Tengden has had a little more time to look at consumer stuff as we end this year. Hard to believe. In the next hour, update you more on some of the other news talk happening. Hey, Google. Hey, Alexa. Play the Pulse of an H. Back Jack Heath, J-Dog on the boards. Back in a moment. Oh, fun stuff, fun stuff. Welcome back. Doug Tengden, worldmarketadvisors.com with economic thoughts as we begin our week with just a day or so to go before we bring in a new year, 2025. Good morning, Doug. I'm okay. I had to chuckle over the break before today. Speaking of the economy, Janet Yellen, Treasury Secretary, former Fed chair, and her stern warning that if we don't raise the debt limit and raise spending, all hell could break loose. Isn't this the person who told me and you that and all of us that inflation's only transitory? Oh, hmm, hmm. Yeah. Well, again, it's that inflation, the economy. When it gets that bad, the economy, the economy, the economy. But you all noted, um, Doug. Mm. Well, again, a lot of people don't talk about some of these things, and of course, he lived a life of trying to help others, and no one's perfect, and death, even with loved ones we have in our lives, death has a way of passing, of making a lot of the maybe the things that weren't ideal go away. But you remember the positives, and certainly had an incredible 100-year life of really post presidency. In fact, someone I did get a call, but I didn't get back to the a media person wanted me to get my take on Carter in the New Hampshire presidential primary back in 1976 when he won the primary here. No one knew him. He came here and he won door to door, restaurant to restaurant, staying with families and supporters, winning the New Hampshire primary, a Southern governor from Plains, Georgia, putting him on the map, winning on to become president. Um, but it's interesting. He showed that if you get out there and work hard, and I think that's what the retail politicking in New Hampshire is all about. Bill Clinton would attest to that. So I think he showed New Hampshire does matter if you look at his life. Uh, but of all presidents, let me just say this: of all presidents, I think he showed after one term and getting trounced by Ronald Reagan that your life ahead of you and what you do does make a difference, not your time in office. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. And it's funny, speaking of New Hampshire, when Bill Clinton, when I was at WMUR-TV as news director, and he was in our newsroom, and people forget he was trailing before the primary. He was in fourth or fifth place, not only behind Paul Tsongas, but people like Tom Harkin of Iowa, Bob Kerrey of Nebraska, Jerry Brown of all people from California. And I said to him one day in the newsroom, as the governor of Arkansas, he had no big staff like Carter. He had no big backing. He was from the South. I said, Governor, I love you coming by. You're always available for the interviews now that you understand who's watching. Why are you running for president? You don't have a great chance. And you know what he said? Clinton in the newsroom was not on camera. He said, Jack, he laughed the way Bill Clinton would laugh. And he goes, what do you mean? He goes, I have a very good chance. I'm running for a job. There's only 8 people who applied. I'm one of 8. And the service merchandise down the road is looking for a new manager in Manchester, New Hampshire. They had 50 people apply. I'm only one of 8 running for president. I got a damn good chance. And you know what he did when he won? His people called the newsroom, and I was invited down as the first televised, first interview in the Oval Office once he had won, because he thanked New Hampshire so much, declared himself the comeback kid. And before he went on camera, he wanted to bust my chops. He goes, remember you asked me I didn't have that good of a chance? How'd I do? How did I do? Yeah, no. No, he was a no, but he like Carter, he showed you can kind of be a national nobody, but a governor from a small state, and get out there, and if you try it, you never know. You never know. You just yeah, you might just win. Yeah, yeah. Well, it's a great story. Yeah, yeah, yep. Amazing. From Georgia, by the way. Yeah. All right. Yes. All right, Doug Tangton, World Market Advisors. Happy New Year. All right. 10 o'clock hour coming up. Hey, Google, hey, Alexa, play the Pulse of an H. Jack Heath, J Dog on the boards. Back in a few.